Now, before I'm going to show you the code, uh, I'm going to show you first the difference between an ordinary column and a foreign key field so that we would understand the difference on how are we going to input data into a foreign key field compared with the ordinary columns. Okay, so in our previous video, we have the register. I think it was actually the register. Okay, back. So we have the register page, okay, in which we let the user to enter the name, password, and the full name. And as you can see here, all the username, password, and the full name are all varchar. Okay, so therefore, whatever the data inputted by the user into our fields are the ones that are going to be uh, inputted into our columns. As you can see here, we have colas, the column, and so on. Okay, so these are ordinary columns. Okay, so how about for a foreign key field? Okay, so take note, we don't have any foreign key into our TBL users. So we have it here in our TBL contacts. Now, so what are our foreign key columns in TBL contacts? So first is we have the user ID. So as you can see here, uh, the value are numbers. Okay, and as what I have discussed before, these user ID columns uh, is the column that holds the ID of the user who owns these contacts. Okay, and the other foreign key field here is we have the contact group. So as you can see again, we have numbers. Okay, so but actually these numbers are coming from our TBL groups. For example, we have 1. So what is our 1? So we have family. 2 is friends, 3 is classmates, and so on. Okay, but then instead that we are going to write the words, okay, here, or the text, we are just going to use the ID into our TBL contacts for our groups. Okay, again, this is called as our foreign key. Okay, so I hope it is clear now that in ordinary columns, we're just going to use whatever is inputted by the user or typed by the user. Those are going to be saved in those columns. But in this case, if ever it is a foreign key, it should be coming from a lookup table. For example, in our user ID, the lookup table here is actually the TBL users. So these values here are coming from TBL users, and these values here are coming from the TBL groups. Okay. So so meaning, are we going to let the user to input the numbers? Okay. Are we going to let the user to memorize the ID for each of the groups? Okay, because take note, if ever the user is going to select for a classmate, so does it mean to say that the user knows that the ID of the classmate is 3? Okay, so if ever that we're going to go back, I'm going to use colas 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I have created here an add contact. Okay, when I click on add contacts here, it is going to open the add contact page. Okay, so as you can see there, we have now our add contact. I have created beforehand so that we are not going to have a very long video for this topic. Okay, so I have here the contact name, phone number. So all of these would be coming from the user, okay, or from the input of the user. How about for the group ID? Am I going to write 3 or 2 or whatever? Okay, so actually we should not be doing it this way. Okay, so what are we going to do is we are going to let the user to select for a list of text, okay, then whatever is the selected item here would have a corresponding ID number for the groups, and that is the one, if let us say if selected one is classmates, and if ever the ID of the classmates is 1, so that is the one going to be saved on the foreign key field. Okay, so in this case we are going to use a drop down box, or otherwise others call this one as the combo box. Okay, and we are going to let the user to select from the options, okay, given on the list. Then as we are going to save it on the database, we are going to save the corresponding ID of the selected item here. So therefore, just imagine that we have, let us say, we have 1 here. I'm going to select black. Then possible we have 3, possible we have 5, but all of those IDs are hidden. Okay. So therefore, again, we are going to use a combo box or a select element so that we could let the user to select for an item, but then save the value which is the ID. Okay. So I hope you get the difference between an ordinary column, a normal column, and a foreign key field. Okay, so we're going to have now our first is from the main. So I just added here actually a button. First is I'm going to a button. Where's my button? So I have here the button. Okay, for my add contacts. So I'm going to have this button here. And when the user clicks on this button, it is going to call add contact. Okay, so we have here the method or the function add contact. Then we have here a router. Okay. Okay, so we have the use router from the next navigation. Then we have initialized here router object. Okay, then we use that router object to push it to push the add contact page into our routes. Okay, so when it is called, so it is going to call. By the way, I have created here an add contact folder and page.js just below or under the or inside this add contact folder. So we have it here. Okay, so we have here the use state, and by the way, actions, because we are going to use later on to connect to our database. Then we have so far the name, phone, email, and our address. Okay, then the submit, because I have created here a button, okay, for the submit. Actually, I just copied the register page. Okay, I pasted here, then I just edited all of this. So the algorithm is just the same, except for later on when we are going to have the group select. Okay, so I think nothing is new here. Okay, except that we are going to change the group ID. So we are not going to use an input element, okay, because what we are going to use there is we're going to have a select or a drop down list. Okay, so it should not be an input element. Okay, so first is we are going to modify our API. Okay, so in our API, actually there's nothing new here. I just created, first is a groups API or endpoint, because it would be the groups file that is going to return the list of groups. Okay, so up here get groups, then select asterisk order by group name and so on. Okay, so if ever that I'm going to use my other page for the postman, okay, I have here operation is get groups, and JSON has no value, because we don't need, because we are going to extract or retrieve all groups. So when I click on send, this is going to display or return a JSON of all groups with the group ID and the group name. Okay, so this is our PHP or our API endpoint. Okay, so again, I have created a new API endpoint named groups. Okay, so how are we going to get the groups? Okay, so from our contacts, okay, so at the start of the page, so I'm going to create, or I'm going to create here a method. I'm just going to call it get groups is equal to, okay, so since we are going to have a get, so I'm just going to copy, for example, the get contacts here, I'm just going to copy so that it would be easier for us to type. Okay, so but instead of trying to have the contacts, it should be our groups. Okay, then we are not going to have any data, so therefore I'm just going to delete the JSON data here. And since we are going to have an asynchronous access, so therefore we're going to use await, and it says there would be an error because await is only allowed with async function or asynchronous function, so we're going to have async there. Okay, so JSON is, I'm just going to have blank, then get groups. Okay, okay, so I'm just going to test it first if ever that we could actually retrieve all group data. Okay, but then, so when is this function to be executed? So we are going to have at the start of the page, so therefore we're going to use set effects, but then we don't have a set effect yet, so I'm going to have here set, no, it is not set, it is use effect. Okay, so it there. Okay, so we have use effect. It is an ordinary function except that it has its dependency list. Okay, so we're just going to have the dependency as blank. It is because we are going to make we're going to let next execute this one only at the beginning of the load page load. Okay, so it's here that we are going to call get groups function. Save. Console. Okay. Wow, warning. Okay, so we have here now the array of 6, okay, for the list of groups. So therefore we have successfully retrieved our groups. Okay, so next is we are going to create a list. I'm just going to call it groups list. Use state. Okay, that is going to hold the list of groups returned by our function get groups. Okay, so instead of I'm just going to have a console, so I'm going to have set. I used set groups list. Then the response data. Okay, So next is I am going then to display uh, groups list into my uh, select element. But before that, since we are going to have a value to be returned or to be submitted into our PHP later on or to our API, so I'm going to assign a group ID is equal to use state. Maybe I'm just going to initialize it with 0 because it would be numbers. Okay. So we are going to use this one later on when the user is going to select for an item from the list. So first we're going to have our groups list to be in the form of a select element. So we're going to have select, okay? Then we're going to have the value. Okay, the value would be group ID, the one that is displayed or initialized into our use state. Okay, then on chains we are going to have set, meaning we are going to use on chains, meaning when the user selects an item from the list. So we're going to use set group ID e.target.value. No, it is value. Close. Okay, then close. So we have now our select statement. Okay, so next inside a select statement or element, I mean, so we are going to have options. Okay, so it would be option, then option 1, and so on. Then we're going to have option, then option 2 with values. Okay, but where should be the data coming from? It would come from our groups list above. Okay, so we have here our groups list, which is going to be populated with the get groups. Okay, so after get groups has been executed, so therefore groups list would then have a value, would then contain the value returned from the database, from TBL groups. So after that, we are then going to display as options into our select element here. Okay, so since this would be coming from the JavaScript, so therefore we're going to have what's this? Curly braces. Okay, so we are going to have groups list that map. Okay, then I'm just going to call it group comma index okay, then okay, so we are going to return a JSX. Okay, so what would be our JSX? We have option, then we need to supply for the value. What should be the value? It should be group dot group ID. Where does this group ID came from? We have here our group ID. Okay, so the first element would be 3 and so on. Okay, because they are arranged according to the group name. Okay, so that's for the value. And supposedly we're going to have here classmates and so on. But since it would depend on the value from the database, so therefore we are going to get group that group underscore name. Okay, we have here group underscore name. Okay, By the way, we will be getting error later on with, we must have to have here a key is equal to, we could just use the index as of now. Actually, we could use, since this is unique, we could also use our ID. Okay, but in this case, I'm just going to use first our index. Okay. Okay, so save. Okay, I have no value, so we're going to test. We're going to try. Where's the error here? Group name for the option. Set groups list responsive data. Oh, it is not save yet. Okay, so save. Oh, oh, GRP. Okay, so I'm just going to use here GRP. Okay, save. Okay, so we have it there now. Okay, so we have the list of what's this? The list of groups. Okay. So be careful again. I'm again victimized by typographical error. So next is how are we going to save? Okay. So take note here that we are now letting the user to select for an item here, but it should return the value of the ID. Okay. Set group ID and so on. Okay. So next is how are we going to save? We are going to here our submit. Okay. So again, I'm just going to copy from into our register. I'm going to copy. Anyway, again, as I've said, they have the same algorithm. Okay. So, but instead of trying to have the users, we're going to use our. So we are not going to use contacts. It is because we are going to save to contacts, not in our groups. Okay. So take note here that in our contacts, we are going to have, there are two foreign keys. Okay. So the user ID and the contact group. So we have now generated the value for the contact group. Okay. So we could now have here group ID but anyway, I'm going to show you first our PHP. Okay, so I have already edited my contacts API. Okay, so I have created here an add contact function. Okay, so it is going to require the user ID, name, email, phone, address, and the group ID. So take note here that the group ID and the user ID are both foreign keys. Okay, so nothing is new here. Insert, then the bind parameters, and return 1 or 0 if ever it is 1 if no error, and 0 if ever there is an error. Okay, so there's nothing new here with our PHP. Okay, so we are going to have the group ID. Then I guess we have the name. I'm just going to follow that. Then email. Phone. Address. Group ID. And the user ID. Now we have the user ID. Okay, so the group ID. Then we have for the names, I'm just going to have the name there. Name, then email, address, no, phone, address, and okay, I'm just going to have one first. Okay, so as you could see here, by the way, I'm just going to clarify that all on the left side here are actually the variables as defined into our API. Okay, and these values here are the values into our from our state variables. Okay, so I hope you are not going to get confused with our values here. Okay, so the only problem we have now is we don't have the user ID yet. Okay, because as you could see here, I didn't pass the user ID. Okay, but if ever we're going to have our main, we have here our ID. Okay, the user ID. So what I'm going to do is, I actually, as I have told you on our previous video, we should not have the user ID into our URL. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the user ID, and but still I could pass that data, okay, by using now our session storage. Okay, so we could have it in from the login, but I'm just going to have here. Okay, so session storage that set item. Okay, so I'm going to have the user ID with the value, comma, user ID. Okay, where is this value? It comes from the user ID. Okay. Okay, so take note, it would be better if ever you are going to set the user ID or store it in a session storage in the login page. Although I'm just showing you here in my main page. Okay, so I have now session storage, meaning anything that has been stored in our session storage could be accessible to all pages, okay, into our application, as long as the session still still up. Okay, so if it is still open, so therefore this user ID is still available for all pages. So therefore, in my add contact here, in my user ID, I'm going to use the session storage that user ID, get item, or just directly the name of the variable. Okay, so we have now our group ID coming from our select statement, and the user ID coming from the other page, which is stored in our session storage. Okay. Oh, by the way, our operation is add contact. Okay, so I'm going to have here add contact, and our JSON still our JSON data, and we're going to have the endpoint for the contacts.php. You have successfully added a new contact. Contact fade. Okay, so it should be a post, then so on. Okay. So the only new here is, I guess, we have this one here. By the way you submit it, just the same with our previous videos. Okay. Okay, save. I'm going to try. Okay, so add contacts. Then I'm going to add who else? I don't have a name. Beanie May. Then 1435345. Email. Home address, CDO. Then we're going to have crashes. Okay, hopefully we don't have any typographical error. Submit. Oh, failed. Okay, so failed. Okay, so I'm going to test. I'm going to try. I'm going to display console.log. Okay. Save. Okay. On code exception, then contact user ID cannot be null. Wait. I'm just going to refresh, by the way. So I'm just going to refresh this one. Then add contacts. Then Beanie May. Then crash. Submit. Oh. User ID. So. JS16. So it has a value of 2, but it says cannot be null. So we need a user ID. User ID. Oh. Okay, so here's my error. My user ID here is with underscore, but what I have written here is user ID, so I'm just going to use the user ID. Okay, save. I guess that's the error. Submit. Okay, you have successfully added a new contact. So okay, so I have added Beanie May. So as you can see now, we have Beanie May Hasulan. Okay, so I'm going to add another one. So I'm going to have fried Partusa phone. Kamigin. Then family. Save. Okay, you have successfully added a new contact. Then we should have fried here now. Okay, so sorry for the glitches again, but then I hope you have fully understood how are we going to deal with foreign keys into our database. Okay, so that's all for this video, and I'll see you on the next one.